Welcome to the Cover Two Men podcast.
where two men cover stuff.
I'm Grant,
And I'm Bryce.
and today we will be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, the team with 99 overall offense and 60 overall defense.
Yeah, seriously, their defense has had some struggles over the years. I mean, it's not even just like a couple season thing. They've always been known for just having a terrible defense, but their offense is like stacked except their offensive line.
They have made a lot of additions in a lot of different fields, but I still think their offense is the best side of the field, the more dominant side of the field.
For sure.
Overall, this Bengals team is one that is in the middle of, I would say, a crisis, but not in a negative way, because they have a big decision to make. Because parts of the team are Super Bowl positions. They have Super Bowl positions on their roster, like Joe Burrow at quarterback. We saw him play in the Super Bowl. I think he can still be playing the Super Bowl again. I think he's actually in his prime right now, in his prime ages at 29 years old. That's when you start to see quarterbacks really make that jump. And just like how NBA players kind of get in their prime in their later 20s, I think Joe Burrow is in his prime right now. He just hasn't had the health and the team to show that. I think they have a Super Bowl wide receiver core with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think they also have guys like Dexter Lawrence, which you would usually see on a playoff team, a player like him. So you have these guys that really do spell Super Bowl roster. But then there are some questions. Like you pointed out, Bryce, the offensive line, that is pretty concerning. And you look at the tight end group. I'm not confident in Mike Gesicki. I mean, I know their wide receivers are good, but is Mike Gesicki a reliable tight end at his age of 30? I'm not sure, but today we're going to go into their depth chart and into their schedule.
One thing, like you said, obviously, Joe Burrow. I mean, he's a great quarterback. He's some people, sometimes will take him out of the top three conversation, but he is a top three, top five quarterback. He always has been. I mean, Joe Burrow is an elite quarterback. So their quarterback room is very, very good. I mean, not only do they have Joe Burrow, they also have Joe Flacco. And am I saying Joe Flacco's good? No. But as a backup, not too terrible. He had some good years on the Ravens when he was in his prime. Now he's 41, so he's very old. But, he's got the veteran knowledge just in case, Joe Burrow were to go down. He could play a little bit, but, hopefully that won't happen. But like I said, this quarterback room is just very good, especially with Joe Burrow leading the way.
I think this quarterback room is one to be proud of for the Bengals because Joe Flacco can hold his own. And we look to last year, Joe Flacco only getting, I think it was 3 wins last year in his time that he was a starter. But for a guy that is in his 40s, 41 years old, I think that he is still a decent enough quarterback to where if Joe Burrow does happen to get injured, Joe Flacco can still come in and be a solid backup. But they
Yeah.
also have Josh Johnson on this team, which, I mean, if you look at all the teams he's played for, he has played for way too many teams. I think he's got the record for the most teams a player has played for in NFL history.
Also had Sean Clifford from
Yeah.
Green Bay.
I was going to say he's a Packer, so you could probably tell us about him too.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I'm pretty sure that I do remember a couple games where he um came in, and while he wasn't the best, but he was Green Bay's backup for a little bit before they traded for Malik Willis. Um I'm pretty sure they traded for Malik Willis in 2024 season, and then Malik Willis became their backup. So, he's not bad, but we did trade for someone else because he wasn't a good enough backup. So I'm sure he'll end up being a third string on this roster. And if he's not as good as Josh Johnson, might not even make the actual roster, but we will see. And then you can talk about this running back room with Chase Brown being their starting running back. And to be honest with you, this team is a very pass heavy offense. I mean, they do not rely on the run whatsoever. This is a pass first team 100%. But when they need to run the ball, which every team does, no matter how much of a pass from first team you are, you're going to have to run the ball. Chase Brown, I think he's a decent running back. Do I think he's elite? No. But he is 24 going on 25. He may have turned 25 recently, but he's still fairly young. And he is a decent running back. I think that for a team like the Bengals with the scheme of their offense, I think he's really all they need in a running back. And you look at some of the other people behind him. You have Samaje Perine, Taj Brooks, and then you have Gary Brightwell. I don't really know any of those people. Do you know any of those people?
Samaje Perine did make a lot of noise in years prior, but he is 30 and he has definitely slowed down. I think he is a decent second option, but I'm not sure if he is a reliable second option if he needs to play a full game. Taj Brooks is from Texas Tech. He just got into the league last year, and I've heard a lot about him, but he didn't really get much action last year for me to actually give him like an evaluation. But with Chase Brown,
Okay.
one thing that I would like to point out about Chase Brown is that a lot of people in fantasy were saying that he was an avoid candidate. You don't want to draft Chase Brown, and that is because this is a pass first offense, like you said, which means that Chase Brown isn't really going to get the ball much because it's not a 50-50 balanced offense. The Bengals
Yeah,
rely on their pass game. But what we did see, though, is that when Joe Burrow got injured, it let Chase Brown get the stats that he needed to get 1,000-yard season. So Chase Brown could be a sneaky fantasy option if you are willing to draft him in the later rounds. Because if Joe Burrow gets hurt, Chase Brown can still prove himself. And we even look to a game that Joe Burrow was playing, and in the game against the Cardinals, he still went for 101 yards.
for
So
sure.
if there's a game where the offense just isn't clicking, maybe they're playing a tough team, and I know Arizona's not a tough team, but still, he could still be reliable enough to where I think he's worth it if he's available in the seventh or eighth round, potentially. But I would also still be cautious about this pass first offense that he's in.
For sure. I do think like Chase Brown, to be honest with you, if he was on a different team, like I feel like he's great for the Bengals because they can use him when they need him. But I feel like if he were to go to a run first team, like I don't know, well Green Bay is a great example of that. If he were to be put in a system like that, I think he would be a top 15 running back because he really has showed that he's good. He just doesn't get near as, he doesn't get handed the ball near as much. I feel like he could have, like you said, I mean, last season he did have 1,000 yard season, but I feel like he could have, maybe 1,200 yards or so with a decent amount of touchdowns if he was in a run first offense. I really do think he's a pretty good running back.
Oh, and another thing too, if this passing game clicks next year, if they start doing really well and Chase Brown is just kind of sitting in this offense not doing anything, that could be a potential trade candidate I'd watch out for. Because imagine Samaje P. Ryan, he could take over the starting job. Maybe the Bengals do a trade where they trade Chase Brown to get a position that they need to go for a Super Bowl run. And again, this isn't a hypothetical where they are that team that can they're like one piece away from making a Super Bowl run. I could see a Chase Brown trade for maybe a way worse running back and a good player that they need in a different position in the midseason, kind of giving up on their run game because their pass game is already good enough.
For sure. I mean, you look at their passing offense or their receivers, it's amazing. I mean, obviously you have Jamar Chase, the best wide receiver in the NFL. Then you have T. Higgins, who is probably the second best wide receiver two in the NFL. George Pickens is probably the first best, but T. Higgins is, the second best. So that gives you the first best wide receiver in the NFL and the second best wide receiver two in the NFL. And they also have Andri I Iosivas.
I think his name's Andre Iosivas.
Iosivas, okay. So I've heard of him before. He's a decent, wide receiver three But I mean, you don't really have to have an elite wide receiver three when you have guys like Jamar Chase and T Higgins.
Oh, and Andre Iosivas had 400 yards last year. So the fact that they have a 400-yard wide receiver three in this room just shows you that their offense relies in the passing game. And it also shows you that the tight ends don't really get much love. And I think that's deserved to a certain degree. Mike Gesicki only had 300 yards last season as the starting tight end. And that is just kind of because he's not a good enough player to be a tight end one, in my opinion. I think maybe in an offense like this, he serves his role as a role player. But don't expect Mike Gesicki really to do much this year. I think it
For sure.
relies more on. I think Andre Iosivas is better than Mike Gesicki as a wide receiver three.
I do know that this offensive line is like we were talking about, it is shaky, but there is one guy that could potentially maybe have a breakout season. Their right tackle, Amarius Mims. He is only let me see. I'm pretty sure he's only 23 or 24 years old. He's very young. He's 23, and he was drafted last, not this past draft, but the draft before that. And he's very young. That's very young. Still plenty of seasons to break out. And I feel like if things go to plan, he should be the franchise right tackle. um you look at their center, Ted Karras. I don't really know much about him. Their right guard, Dalton Reisner. Now another guy I do know is pretty decent. Is I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, Orlando Brown Jr. He's not terrible. He's pretty decent, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's had a success with like I think he's won a Super Bowl too.
So he's definitely a decent tackle. So their tackles, to be honest with you, aren't terrible, but their guards and their center is what really needs some work.
Oh yeah, Ted Karras is 33 years old. I think
Yeah.
they're probably looking at his replacement in the years to come, and I think they got that with Connor Liu, to be honest. So when I say looking at the replacement, I really mean just like evaluating Connor Liu because Connor Liu from Auburn is one of the best centers in the draft. Now I'm a Panthers fan. I love to talk about Sam Hecht, and I think that he will be the best center just because he's put in the best situation. Connor Liu could be the starter midway through the season on this offensive line. Aside
Maybe
from
even at
that,
the beginning.
yeah, I don't know. I think Ted Karras. I'm just big on like rookies kind of sitting for the first couple of games, but I don't know how the Bengals are with that. But Dalton Risner is 30 years old, and Orlando Brown Jr. is also 30 years old, and we have seen some uh age on this line. So I'm glad that they bring in a new center, the center of the future for the Bengals. But this offensive line, I don't know how much time they're going to give Joe Burrow to throw the ball.
And
Well,
then if you go to the defense,
they brought in some new guys: Jonathan
they
Allen,
did.
Dexter Lawrence, Boye Mafe on this line.
Yeah, Boye Mafe is a guy I wanted to talk about. So, um, sure they did lose Trey Hendrickson, their edge rusher, but their starting left edge, or whatever they decide to put him at, it could change left edge, right edge, but right now he's their starting left edge is Boye Mafe, who I really think is a good signing. Is he as good as Trey Hendrickson? No, but I do think he is a decent, fairly young replacement. I'm pretty sure 26 years old is how old he is, I'm pretty sure. And then at their right edge position, they also have Miles Murphy. Miles Murphy is 24. So he is young, and last season he had 5.5 sacks. So that's not bad. I mean, for a 24-year-old, he's 6'5", 275 pounds, and 5.5 sacks. I mean, that's not that bad, to be honest with you. Not terrible stats. So this edge rusher room, while they did lose a superstar, they got Boye Mafe, and they also have Miles Murphy that kind of can make up for that.
The departure of Trey Hendrickson has been definitely been relieved by these new additions to where it hurts a little bit less. Trey Hendrickson was getting up there in age. He was getting
For sure.
older, and it was honestly a good decision to move on from him. If this team is going for a Super Bowl, I think they need to go younger. And I don't think this is like their last year to get a Super Bowl as well. So adding these younger guys is helpful to go in that direction of not only going for a Super Bowl, also being able to compete for the next few years. It also makes sense though, because Joe Burrow, when he was commenting on how Trey Hendrickson's free agency departure, what his opinion on that was going to the rival Baltimore Ravens. He said it was not very surprising. And then Burrow also said, I know Trey. I love Trey. I just know how he operates. It feels to me, from what I can pick up in that very shocking statement, just because it has a lot on the table to like for us to speculate about, that maybe Trey Hendrickson went to a rival on purpose to kind of get back at the Bengals and make them regret not re-signing him. I don't know how concerning that's going to be because Trey Hendrickson's, I think, like 31 years old. So maybe he's washed and he won't bother the Bengals. But I mean, they do play the Ravens twice on their schedule. I'm not really sure if that is if that's a team that they want to face right now with an angry Trey Hendrickson.
Another great trade that they had was trading for Dexter Lawrence, who is 28 years old. And, he's always been a great defensive tackle in the league. Now, one kind of concerning thing is the fact that he only had a half a sack last season. Very concerning, the fact that he only had a half a sack. But you do have to look at his career. In his whole career, he's had 30 and a half sacks, and he's 28 years old. Dexter Lawrence, he's not a fast defensive tackle. He runs on power, and that's what makes him good is his power, not his speed. So the fact
100%.
that he has less sacks isn't super concerning, but it is a little bit. But I think one pretty funny thing is that he actually had an interception last season as well.
Yeah, you never really see the big guys getting the interceptions, but he managed to do it. I think you said it perfectly, Bryce. The tackles, having 14 solo tackles from a big star is usually like pretty concerning, but I think that just shows that Dexter Lawrence served his purpose. When you see tackles, especially from defensive tackles, that shows you that the running back is running through their gaps. That yeah, tackles means that they did the job and bring the guy down. But if Dexter Lawrence only had 14 solo tackles, we know he's good enough to wrap up the running backs. He's big enough to wrap up the running backs. It just shows that the running backs never ran near him. They always avoided Dexter Lawrence. That was the game plan, was to avoid Dexter Lawrence because he will make you regret it. Having 14 solo tackles basically means, practically, he had 14 opportunities to get the running back, which is very low for a whole season, which he did play the full season. Now, like you also said, the sacks, that can be pretty concerning as well, unlike the tackles, because he had 9 sacks the year prior to this one. I get it if Dexter Lawrence is here to stop the run, his low sack numbers make sense. But considering he went from 9 sacks, almost double digits, to a half a sack in both playing full seasons, is a little bit concerning.
Now, one thing we also have to look at, another addition the Bengals made was Jonathan Allen. While Jonathan Allen is 31 years old, Jonathan Allen has had an amazing career. I mean, in his prime, he was one of the best, if not the best, defensive tackles in the league. He had 29 solo tackles last season and 3.5 sacks, which is not bad numbers for a 31-year-old. It's really not. And to have a guy like Dexter Lawrence and a guy like Jonathan Allen on the same line is just really good. I mean, this defense with Boye Mafe, Dexter Lawrence, Jonathan Allen, Miles Murphy, I mean, these guys really upgraded this defense for sure. And another guy you can look at is Demetrius Knight Jr., who is 25. He had 3 sacks last year with 58 solo tackles, so not bad stats there. He had 2 interceptions. He really wasn't terrible last season, and he's still fairly young. Maybe he can break out and be even better next season. So this defense really does look a decent, I'm not saying they're a top 5 defense, even top 10, but they do look better than they have in the past.
The question for the Bengals is They have all these new pieces. Can they bring it together? And specifically, is there a position that the Bengals might be overlooking? You look at a guy like DJ Turner, who's 25, the same year as Demetrius Knight in age, could also out as well. If you look at his stats, last year he had 18 passes deflected, which is tied for third in the league, still behind my glorious Mike Jackson. But DJ Turner is a guy that a lot of people, both Bengals fans and not, look to as the breakout candidate this year. They got Brian Cook at free safety from the Chiefs, who had 50 solo tackles last year, couldn't record any interceptions, but if you look at that Chiefs secondary, who also had Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie, I really just think that explains it itself. He's never really been known for having interceptions in his career. He's played 4 seasons and has only accumulated 3. I think maybe in this secondary he might have a better chance of getting interceptions since there isn't a Trent McDuffie or a Jalen Watson in this group. But there are some guys in here that cannot be disrespected. They also bring in Kyle Duggar as well, which bear in mind he's past his prime. He's 30 years old, but is still a great addition to this defense. There is some players like Shamar Stewart, which did not do well last year. Their first round pick in 2025. I know he played a shorter season, but just looking at the guy and all the drama he's had, there could be some guys on here that may get into some drama, which I hope that does not happen for the Bengals.
For sure. He may even be a trade, candidate too, now that they have Boye Mafe. Um, Not for sure. They definitely could still keep him, but there is also that chance that they trade him too
Yeah.
if he causes locker room issues.
Well, Shamar Stewart, he might want to go back to Texas A&M. That's where he wants to get traded to, with what happened last year. I don't know if you heard, Bryce. Shamar Stewart, like after he got drafted, he was trying to go back to Texas A&M because of some of the contract issues. And so the
Oh
guy
wow,
was basically a dud on the team. They did bring in Cassius Howell from Texas A&M, which I wouldn't be surprised if he starts over Miles Murphy. Miles Murphy did have 5.5 sacks last year, but that's just going to be an interesting position battle because it's not a diss on Miles Murphy to say that Cassius Howell could compete. It's just I think Cassius Howell is a good player. Considering the Bengals got him in the second round, not even the top first like 5 picks of the second round. Awesome pick by the Bengals there. Cincinnati Bengals have a pretty decent schedule ahead of them. A lot of teams that we don't really know how good they are yet. They're not established bad or good teams.
for sure. So you look at week 1 against Tampa Bay. This is going to be played at home, so this is going to be at Cincinnati. And you look at this game, to be honest with you, I think the Bengals really could win this game. Week 1, it's in Cincinnati. More than likely, everyone will be healthy because it's week 1. No one has gotten injured by that time, generally. And it's against Tampa Bay, who is going to be trying to figure out an offense without Mike Evans, the star that they've had for years. And, he was getting old, but still they're going to have to figure out a new way to run their offense because he's been there for so many years as their main target.
I noticed that the AFC North plays some NFC South teams very early in their schedules. And so I am all for it, Bengals. Please shut out Tampa Bay. Absolutely destroy them week 1. I will be rooting for you. I will be hoping that this defense clicks. I will be hoping that Joe Burrow and his wide receivers are amazing together and that they all stay healthy throughout the game because this Tampa Bay team needs some humbling. They play Houston week 2. That's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a game that I don't think uh, Houston has much of an advantage of because the one offense that I think that can match up with Houston's defense is the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the offensive line may not be able to match up with Houston's defensive line, but I don't think Houston's secondary can match up with the wide receivers that we have just talked about on the Bengals and Joe Burrow as
Yeah,
well. Joe Burrow should be able to read some of these defenses, and I think he can get past Houston. This is going to be a toss up game. At Houston, they could be favored if we're just talking about who's favored in this game. I would say be prepared to go any direction in this game.
For sure. I mean, because they're kind of two opposite teams here. You have the Bengals, who have a top offense in the NFL, other than their offensive line. And then you have a Houston team who has one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the NFL with a shaky offense. So you have the Bengals' questionable defense going against the Texans' questionable offense, and then the Bengals' high powered offense going against the Texans' high powered defense.
hundred
You
percent.
know, that defensive line, like you said, could give some struggles to the offensive line and Joe Burrow. And, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are amazing, but, they do have one of the best secondaries in the NFL also with Derek Stingley and I forgot his name there. What is their corner two's name again? I forgot. He's
Dude,
young. He's really young.
my mind's going blank as well. They have Kamari Lassiter though, which is also in the
Yeah,
secondary.
yeah, that's who I'm talking about. He's really good. So they just have a really good secondary, really good defensive line. So I just think this is going to be a really good game because of that, shaky offense versus shaky defense, and then good offense versus good defense. So I
Yeah,
think that could be really good.
they have two games against Pittsburgh and Jacksonville, which we could try talking about both of these. They play Pittsburgh later, and Jacksonville is I know we have differing opinions on Jacksonville because I haven't really actually looked at Jacksonville's roster yet. Jacksonville won their division last year. They beat Houston in the AFC South for the title, and both of these teams they are probably not as good as they were last year. I think these games could go either way, but I hope Cincinnati can win both of them. Then they go at Miami. We've been treating Miami like a free win. They're going to try and be tanking this year, so we can move past that. Then they got the bye
Yeah.
week. And then after that, they go at Baltimore.
See, that's going to be a tough game with the Ravens, good defense and their good offense. I mean, as long as they're healthy by this point, I really don't see the Bengals winning this one. I did want to say one thing about the game against the Jaguars. I think the Bengals are going to probably win this game because as much as I know some people are high on the Jaguars, and I hate to be a hater, but I kind of have to be. The fact that they lost their running back, they, their receivers are questionable. I do think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to have a bounce back year, but they lost so many key pieces. They lost some pieces for sure, and I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last season. So I think the Bengals could pull off a win against the Jaguars, and then back to the Ravens. I don't think they can.
That's a fair evaluation of the Jaguars Bengals game. The Ravens, I'm not sure if it's going to be a split. We're probably going to talk about the Week 17 game as more of an open game for the Bengals. I don't think at Baltimore is going to be where they get it done. Versus Tennessee, if we're are we going to treat Tennessee like a free win?
To be honest with you, I don't think so. Do I think it's a really, they definitely could beat them for sure. But I don't think, going into the Dolphins game, I call that a free win. But Tennessee could be one of those sneaky teams that we see doing decent this year. A young quarterback who has shown flashes in Cam Ward. They just, help their receiving core by drafting, uh,
Carnell Tate.
yeah, Carnell Tate. They drafted Carnell Tate. One shaky thing is their running backs, and their O line is decent. Their defense, they've made some good additions. So I mean, this team could be a sneaky, decent team. Do I think they're going to be a playoff team? Probably not. But I think the Bengals will probably pull it off. But I don't think it'll be as easy of a win as some people might think, and as it will against the Dolphins.
I think Tennessee probably isn't favored, but they're definitely going to give them a run for their money. So, well said. They play the Falcons in Madrid, and then they also play the Steelers as well. I feel like both the Falcons and Steelers kind of have parallels. Both have washed quarterbacks. Both have rosters that do stand out to a certain extent, but are not anything kind of worthy of being like, I don't think the Bengals are favored.
So
Jesse,
I am going
based
to say one thing I disagree on. is the Falcons. I know people don't think Tua can do it, but to be honest with you, if you look at Tua in 2023 and 2024, he was a top 10, top 15 quarterback. And then he got injured over and over and over again because he was behind a terrible offensive line. Tua, one thing about him, he cannot throw a deep ball, but mid throws and short throws, he is accurate. He is an accurate quarterback. While he struggled with his rough offensive line at on the Dolphins, now he is on a Falcons team with a really good offensive line. The Falcons also have Bijan Robinson, the best running back, one of the best at least in the NFL. They have some great defensive players. They have AJ Terrell. They have Jesse Bates. I think they're going to be way better this season, the Falcons. And I know you hate to hear that, but I think they're going to be a pretty good team this season, and I think that could be a team that would really give the Bengals a run for their money.
Yeah, my disagreement is the way Tua got injured is if he had just gotten like leg injuries, his arm got injured, something like that. Okay, makes sense. Bounce back year with a better offensive line. But the dude had like multiple concussions throughout his year. We can point to those years where he did better, but those were years when he had less concussions, and I think those concussions are really starting to affect how he's playing out on the field. I don't think it was that he had a slump last year. I think it was more that the guy is kind of becoming the next Andrew Luck. And while I do hate that for him, and while I do like the Falcons more, I like teams like the Bucks and Saints. I'm just not really confident in Tua because we saw a guy that we know was good go and play terrible. And he had Tyreek Hill for a little bit, but even then he was still bad. He had Jalen Waddle, who got traded for like first round pick to the Broncos. I think maybe multiple other picks. I'm just not sure about Tua, but I am definitely willing to say Atlanta could win this game. If we move on to week 11 and 12 at Washington versus New Orleans, Washington, it really just depends on how Jaden Daniels does when he comes back. It's a Monday Night Football game. I know I like to say primetime games can go either way. Well,
Jaden Daniels is a guy who in the past has been really, really good. And, in his rookie season, he was really good. Got injured this season, but I feel like he definitely should by this time. I mean, week 11, that's he's gonna be ready to play week 1. I'm pretty sure he's good now, and by week 11, that's a lot of weeks to get back in the rhythm and get adjusted. So I think he should be full tilt, ready to play by week 11. And this team, has a few holes, but like you said, I think it could go either way.
the Washington Commanders were pretty good not that long ago. The Saints, on the other hand, I'm hoping they don't do well. But there is a reality where they could win this game, and Tyler Shuck is just that guy. Same thing with at Cleveland too. I think Shedeur Sanders is could improve this year. I think the Browns, especially at Cleveland, can give them a run for their money. But come on, the Bengals are still favored in this game as well.
Yeah, they're just way better than the Browns. The Browns lost Miles Garrett. That was their team. Miles Garrett was their franchise guy. While most teams' franchise guy is, their quarterback or a receiver or running back, it was him. He was the reason they won a few games because no matter how good the quarterback, he was going to get him on the ground. But still, one guy can't do it all, and now they don't even have him anymore. So I still think this is, more than likely going to be a win for the Bengals. But, in division games can be shaky, can go either way. But talent wise, definitely Bengals.
I just watched LaMelo Ball get traded from my favorite team, the Hornets, after a month of investing and watching this team. Cleveland, I know how you feel. I know how you feel. The franchise guys in the NFL don't get traded as often as they do in the NBA, which is why I prefer the NFL over the NBA because you, as a fan who gets invested in the players, experience a lot less heartbreak. And I am very I guess, empathetic towards those Brown fans who rooted for Miles Garrett all the time, and then now the saga has come into an end. Versus Kansas City, playing Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be an exciting matchup. There's been some tension between the Bengals and Chiefs that has kind of cooled down the last couple of years. I would love to see that be rekindled because I think both quarterbacks are worthy of having a good rivalry. At Carolina, they're a sneaky team. I'm not sure who's favorited. Now, I have been very offended. Not very offended. It's reasonable, but I have been somewhat offended that the Bengals have been ahead of the Carolina Panthers in some power rankings. My argument for that is that the Bengals, with Joe Burrow, were 3-3. But then again, the Panthers also had a losing record last year, so 500 is better than a losing record. I still think the Carolina Panthers might could win hosting this game. It really depends, though. I'm just glad the ticket prices are only $51, which is the lowest, second lowest, besides the at Cleveland game, out of all the regular season games for the Bengals.
Like you said, I think I'm fairly high on Carolina. Am I a Panthers fan? Not even close. But I do think they are a solid team that, like you said, could be a sneaky team next season. And I mean, come on, they won their division last season. So I mean, this team is a pretty good team. Their defense got very much improved, and their offense also got some improvements too. So I think that this is going to be a great game, and I think it could go either way.
Speaking of teams we're high on, the Colts at Indianapolis. Bryce and I have discussed many times on many different podcasts about how we view the Indianapolis Colts because the Colts are not a bad team. If you look at when they were healthy, plus the addition of Sauce Gardner, if they can replicate their first half of the year success and adding Sauce Gardner, that's just going to be great. And I think they're going to be scary. They're in a tough division, so they're probably not going to have the same success record wise, but don't count them out. Versus
For sure.
Baltimore, do you think Baltimore gets the sweep?
So I think it's really tough to say. So this Bengals offense is great. Their defense has a lot of new additions. If the new additions go as planned, this defense could be a lot better, allowing them to maybe split with Baltimore. We talked about Baltimore at the beginning of this week, and we talked about the fact that Baltimore is a very questionable team with the fact that they have stars on offense and stars on defense, but they're not a team that's like well rounded everywhere. They just have stars in some spots with not great at all players in other spots. And I feel like this could affect the way they play, but they brought in a new coach. It's going to be a new just a new team, really. I feel like the Bengals could split it. I don't think the Ravens are going to sweep the Bengals.
It's really hard to predict these games because the Steelers won the division last year. They were like the only team to have a winning record. It's hard to kind of evaluate the teams like the Bengals and the Ravens who are supposed to be and are mocked up to be these Super Bowl contenders, but didn't have any success last year. We have nothing to go off of and point to last year when it comes to arguing for teams that are supposed to be playoff teams because they didn't show anything that was playoff worthy last year. So if you want to say one team sweeps the other, go ahead, guys. You guys can do that in the comments all you want. But Bryce and I will kind of stay here saying that they will probably split, but it's very vague. And I think the same thing applies with Cleveland as well, with Miles Garrett out of the building and Jarrett Burse in. Another team that it could be a lot different because Deshaun Watson is back and he could be starting. It's hard to predict some of these AFC North games, and I think since this is the last AFC North podcast, we can kind of just go ahead and summarize the whole division in general. It's very vague. I mean, we don't have much to say about all of them because so much has changed.
For sure. And I think those last two games being divisional games against the Ravens and the Browns, I think it all is going to depend at this point if the Bengals have won up to these last 2 weeks, 9 to 10 games, and the Ravens and Browns don't have playoff records. I feel like the Bengals are more likely to win those games if they are the ones with the better record because they're making that playoff push to maybe get a 1 seed or, a higher seed in the playoff, because I feel like they're more likely to win because if the Ravens were to not have a playoff record by this point, they wouldn't would they not try? No, they would still try, but I'm just saying they wouldn't have that drive to push for the playoffs if by this point they knew they weren't making the playoffs. And this really applies to the Browns. They're not the greatest team, so by week 18, their last game, if they know they've only won 4 games, they know they're not going to the playoffs, and the Bengals already are going to the playoffs. More than likely, they'll finish off with a win.
It could also be a scenario where, like we saw with the Colts and Jaguars a couple years ago, the Browns win that last game and eliminate the Bengals from the playoffs. That would be so funny. I love the AFC North. I love the rivalries. I love that every single team, no matter how good or bad they are, still manages to hate each other. It's probably the best division in football. In my opinion, even as a Panthers fan, I know you may disagree with the NFC North, and I think the NFC North gives them a run for their money. The AFC North has just always been the best division in football, and I am so excited to see how these teams turn out. There's so many. There are very high ceilings and very low floors. So one team has to do bad. I think that's going to be the Steelers and the Browns. To some degrees, both of them will probably be the two shorter ends of the stick, but who knows?
I think that pretty much sums up what we think of their season. And I definitely agree with you on your last statement about more than likely it being the Steelers and the Browns. But, these teams, like you said, high ceiling, low floor, it could go either way. And I think this is going to be a great division to watch.
Well, thank you, Bryce, for joining me in today's podcast. And this is the Cover 2 Men.